Thank you for that thoughtful and powerful introduction to the book. And, indeed, in response to the accusations of racism and Cold War mentality that have been being tossed around very liberally, I would say that the best solution to those claims, again, is to read the book. I believe that the book itself refutes such allegations very directly, even in the introduction. Unfortunately, many of the reviews that I've read give me the impression that the reviewers have not read the book. Now, I will proceed to introduce Albert Fan, the former president of the Chinese Migrant Welfare Association and an Australian citizen who migrated from Hong Kong 39 years ago. Albert Fan is a founding member of the Australian Values Alliance, and he'll be talking about how this book relates to Chinese Australians. So, thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to begin by paying my respect to the local indigenous people, all the elders, the past and present, as they are the traditional custodians of this land where we are holding this meeting. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to say a few words in this launch of Professor Clive Hamilton's book, The Silent Invasion. Professor is facing a lot of pressure at home about his motive. Some have questioned him whether this book will lead to social disharmony or even racism against the Chinese. On this, I would like to make a few comments. But firstly, I myself, on behalf of my community, I'm most grateful that Professor is there to face all these pressures and launch the book today. Most appreciated. Now let's make the focus straight. His book is about China's parties or government's influence in Australia. The concerns originate from China and not from within the Chinese communities. In fact, the communities are facing the same impact of China's invasion. No doubt, Professor is concerned for the Australian security and sovereignty in the face of a strong rise of China. Some Australian Chinese have been aware of the issues that he raised and are increasingly feeling uncomfortable even before this book was published, myself included. In the past, we found very few people whom we can talk to discuss. Now that Professor has filled in this gap, in times when the China's influence has spread from the Chinese into the mainstreams, in areas such as party politics, our universities, and education system, our freedom of speech, publication, etc. All of this would have direct impact on our core values in Australia. To my fellow members of the Chinese community, and even our multicultural community, who feel shocked at hearing this and puzzling what this means to them, I would like to make the following 3 points. Firstly, we may like to know how relevant this book is to examine and discuss the China's influence in Australia. Somebody will say, should this matter be cooled down as it is now directing at our Chinese community, making some of us feel uncomfortable? Now my response are, the book contains lots of information and evidence, some of which are already known to some members of the Chinese community, particularly those from mainland or Hong Kong background. It is valid for us to ask and verify whether such evidence are true or not, and see if they agree with the interpretation of those evidence. In a multicultural society like us, it is fair to have different opinions in interpreting facts. Asking to ban this book or minimize its impact is not the nature of a multicultural society. Now, many things described in this book had occurred under our nose for some time that we cannot simply dismiss. Recent developments shows such influence has been intensified, spreading from the Chinese community in the mainstream. Question for us is, are we in the Chinese community still adopt a not to see, not to hear, or not to think approach? Secondly, Some people may say the book has caused hysteria and is leading to racism against the Chinese in Australia, as Professor Feng Chongyi just said. As some people who are keen to enter public life, they may be suspected or are subjected to scrutiny regarding their loyalty to Australia. Now, to this, I don't think so. And I have not seen racism or discrimination of any kind since the debate has started. Now, in a mainstream society, people could be puzzling with how some things that has happened within the Chinese community that they have never seen before. Chinese community has got very good reputation in this society based on good work by our pioneer. We should be mature enough to be involved in the debate on China's influence as raised in the professor's book. As Australian Chinese, we should have the guts to say this is true or this is not true, and interpret information with reference to the Australian core values which we love and embrace, and based on our understanding about China. As Australian Chinese, we should have the guts to say this is true or not true, and also based on our knowledge that we have experienced in China's history and others. Now, the book is about China's influence in Australia and its implication to our society, including the Chinese community. Those influences could impact on Australian interest or our security. Australian Chinese should rise up and say something based on facts that we know and not by passing them or just ignoring them. Ignoring those facts would have a long-term effect of destroying the hard-earned reputation that Chinese community have built in our society. They will lead to more community split, distrust, suspicions, and marginalization on the part of the Chinese community. Now, thirdly and lastly, some people will say the release of this book affect community harmony or cause harm to our multicultural society. Well, on this, I would say community harmony is based on mutual understanding and trust. The Australian Chinese community is a mature ethnic group in Australia, and it will be in our interest, indeed our responsibility, to take an active part in a debate on China's invention in Australia, or influence in Australia, based on our love of our countries and our belief in our core values of democracy, liberty, and rules of law. Thanks again, Professor, for your hard work and the publication of this book. Thanks.